Good afternoon and Happy New Year, everyone from DEI Advisors. I am Rachel Humphrey with DEI Advisors, and I am delighted to have me joined on the show today by Andrea Foster of Marcus Hotels and Resorts. Andrea, welcome to the show.
Rachel, thank you so much for having me. It is a pleasure to be here with you.
Andrea, we're going to spend about 30 minutes together today talking about your journey to where you are today and some of the lessons that you have learned along the way. Just want to thank you for sharing the tremendous insights that you have with the future leaders in the hospitality industry. And I want to start with one of my favorites, which is your journey to leadership. We each have incredibly different paths. And that's one of the things that I really love about the hospitality industry is that no two careers need to progress in the exact same way. Tell us a little bit about your path to leadership and how you got to your role today at Marcus Hotels.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you so much for, again, the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here. So I have two very supportive parents who raised my younger sister and myself, and they raised us to be independent. My dad is a retired developer, investor, entrepreneur. My mother's a retired teacher. They taught my sister and me the value of hard work and education, and that basically with those things, there's nothing we couldn't achieve. So I'm incredibly blessed, for them. And I was inspired to enter the hospitality industry when I was 14, and I attended a business meeting with my dad. He was meeting with a resort general manager, managing director, over a dinner the night before a board meeting, and he had invited me to come. And it was a woman he was meeting with, and I just sat and was mesmerized by how poised she was, how articulate, how intelligent, and basically at the end of that dinner, I told my dad, I want to do what Cindy does.
Wow.
So, I really, despite being very much like my dad, even that they call me Little Brian, his name's Brian, since I was little, and look a lot like him and everything else. I didn't necessarily see the path to going into business, in the way that he did, because I think mainly because I'm female, and so I had to see it to believe I could be it. And so meeting Cindy gave me, the visibility into a path that I believed, could be mine. So I always am appreciative that, that evening occurred and that introduction occurred. Once I decided hospitality was my career, I chose to study hotel administration at Cornell. I focused on operations and real estate finance. And then I started in operations, first actually at the Statler Hotel on campus. I worked there throughout my undergrad. And one of my early roles post-graduation was as a hotel manager in a private club and hotel in San Francisco. That opportunity was offered to me by the president and general manager of the club at the time as a result of the work I did as their intern the summer prior to my senior year. So, the work we do, basically shows who we are and what we're capable of and makes an impression on people who make decisions and can offer us jobs. So that was a great lesson for me. Do a good job and you'll be remembered and considered going forward. So then through the Cornell network, at a later step shortly thereafter, I had connected again with several Cornell alums, and I was introduced by one of them to Bruce Bolton at PKF in Los Angeles, who hired me as a consultant, then promoted me to associate and vice president, and he became one of my greatest mentors in the industry. Through another industry connection who had become a dear friend, I was recruited to Miraval, where I was VP of business development and later marketing as well. And then later, each of these is kind of a 4 years apart. I spent, give or take 4 years, I think, with each of these. It wasn't jumping around. I'm not that young. Let's see. I was later recruited back to PKF, then, became CBRE Hotels in Boston to run the New England practice. And that actually, gave me the opportunity to move a little bit closer to my native Maine, where I grew up. I spend a little bit more time with family. And then I was recruited again by a very close friend and industry connection, Bill Reynolds, who is my current colleague at Marcus, was recruited to Marcus by his recommendation about 7 years, or just over 7 years ago, for my current role. So really, kind of reiterating, each opportunity came through an industry connection who had become a friend and a mentor. And in each opportunity, in each role, I had the chance to work with and learn from and lead exceptional teams of people. So, I really feel very blessed for the people that I've been able to surround myself with and who have influenced me along the way. And I've had the opportunity to live in 8 cities within 6 states on the West Coast, East Coast, and Midwest. And I currently reside in the DC area, and I travel back to Marcus Hotels, which is our headquarters, on a regular basis. So that brings us to today.
That's incredible. I mean, you talk about so many important lessons in there. You talk about mentors and champions, relationship building, support systems, a dad who takes his daughter to business meetings. These things are all incredible. And I think we're going to touch on some of those in a minute. In each interview, I really like to share with the audience why I invited you to be a guest. Usually it's because each guest has directly impacted me, my career in some way, my personal growth in some way. And I want to be able to share that and give access to more. Your comment about the woman you met at the business dinner is especially interesting to me because you and I first met when you were moderating a panel that I was on many years ago. I had done a lot of content panels and other types of public speaking, but I had never moderated, not certainly to the extent that I do today. And here you came in and you were poised and articulate and stylish and confident and so supportive of the panelists and the way that you let each of us shine. And I have never forgotten it. And I know that we all are our own people in public speaking, but I emulate a lot of my moderating skills from having sat on a panel that you moderated that I was on years ago. But all those words you just used to describe this woman that you're like, if I can see it, I can be it. I had that same reaction to you. So I want to talk about public speaking for a minute. And I don't even know if you'd remember that. I can't remember what conference.
I do. No, I do remember that. Absolutely. And I'm so touched. So thank you.
Talk a little bit about the impact of public speaking for you. You do a lot of it in your career trajectory. And public speaking, of course, can be to your team in a boardroom, to massive conferences and other things. But how do you prepare? What's your comfort level? What would you tell people who find public speaking maybe to be one of the biggest challenges they have in their career aspirations?
Absolutely. So I've always been comfortable speaking in front of people, no matter how large the group, I've always found that to be easy for me to do, at least be in front of people. It may come from having danced since I was 3 years old and done recitals on stage. I'm not sure, but for some reason I do know that, it's simply comfortable. So I don't deal with a lot of anxiety around it, but I know that that's rare. But I still do a lot of preparation because I certainly, though standing in front of people and speaking is comfortable, it's not comfortable if you're not prepared and you don't have the right content, you don't know the flow, you aren't familiar with, your audience and the people, on a panel with you and so forth. So there's a lot of work that does go into it. So I don't take that lightly whatsoever. So I would say, I kind of boil it down to 4 steps. First, what is the message I'm being asked or expected to convey? And I make sure that I have a good grasp on what's being expected of me. Second is, who is the audience and where do I need to meet them? And that's my reference to, meaning what's their level of familiarity with the topic and how do I make it resonate, with those who are listening. Third is, what information do I need to compile to be prepared? Some of it are things like what we're talking today is simply a preparation of recalling some stories and sharing some things that are all within me, that I'm sharing with you, while other presentations are based on data and statistics and information that needs to be gathered and prepared. So I make sure that I have all the information that I need to be able to communicate effectively. And then how best can I communicate the message such that it's clear, concise, engages interest of the audience, and if appropriate, gets their buy-in. So if I can check all of those boxes, that's when I feel that I am most prepared to step in front of an audience and deliver whatever that message is.
That's such great advice. I believe a lot in the preparation factor as well. And knowing your audience really important. I always tell people, I want to know what type of chairs we're sitting in. I want to know what the room is going to be set like. Are we going to have a lavalier or a handheld? Because all those things really impact your comfort level and your flow. in really being prepared. So that's
Absolutely.
advice. Um, One of the other ways that I have gotten to know you is through your involvement with associations, the HLA Foundation, and other nonprofits. And talk a little bit about why that's important for you personally, but also we can learn very different leadership lessons in those roles than maybe we do in our daily career or corporate lives. How have those roles and those passions really shaped who you are as a leader?
Absolutely. That's a great question. First, I want to say I'm absolutely honored to have been involved with HLA and the foundation, including Forward and Castell over the last several years, and now to have joined the HLA Foundation Board of Trustees. So that was a great honor to have received that invitation to be stepping into that role starting this year. The team and the board are truly incredible people and making a notable difference in our industry. So that's what draws me to it. And why it's important to me is really very simple. I could sum it up by saying life is service. I recognize the blessings that I've received in my life, and it's a non-negotiable for me to pay it forward. So that's why. How it's helped me to be a leader. Choosing to contribute contribute, donate, give, simply give, makes people happier. So it's a widely published study that was done, I think, in 2010. It's been talked about a lot. And I think most people would agree from, their own perspective that to give of yourself to others just makes you happy. It feels good to do that. And so my work with associations and nonprofits often involves other people who are giving of their time and their treasure. And which means that their decision making is heart-based more so than it is head-based. They're giving because they care, and not as much from a kind of business-oriented perspective. So I think, simply to sum it up, I've learned to pay attention to what matters to each person and what drives them. So, it's also the goal of, whatever it is that we're looking to achieve, to raise money or to impact more people and develop more people, within our industry, attract more people to our industry, elevate people, whatever, the task may be, those who are receiving that, the time and the treasure, or those who are giving of it, it's important to understand why are they doing it, what matters most to them. And so it's given me, I think, another level of EQ, kind of the emotional quotient, in interacting with people, by participating and engaging in nonprofits and associations.
I think that's benefiting as well because those organizations tend to be maybe smaller than our bigger companies. So really having that one-on-one connection or getting to witness up close, like you said, people's behaviors and what drives them, and those relationships can be really helpful. Going back a minute, you were talking about your parents as tremendous support systems for you, other friends that you've built through the industry, through the career. And last year, someone shared with me an article about each woman having a personal board of directors. And I really loved how that resonated with me about surrounding yourself with people who build you up, who don't just say yes to everything you ask, that really hold yourself accountable. How important is your support system, and how do you really identify those people that you would consider on your personal board?
I love this concept. I love the personal board of directors, I think, and it's a great question. My own network has evolved through my career. As I connect with people at different levels in my career, in different roles that I've held, and people along the way, you'll find people you may not have known very long, but they just simply get you. And I think that's really important, is to surround yourself with people who you value their opinion and feedback. They have a base of understanding of whatever it is that you're looking at, whether it's your specific career trajectory, the industry that you're in. Maybe it's something a little bit more broad about the different situations going on within the world, but they understand you. Yeah, most importantly, they get you as a person and what makes you tick and what drives you. So whom I go to with whatever question I'm considering at the time depends on what it pertains to. So the latter half of last year, there was a big question I was asking myself, and I leaned in on a select group of people close to me to get their perspective. And I wanted them to ask me, and they did, very pointed questions. As you said, I don't look to surround myself with people who coddle me. Not interested in that. Anyone can go, oh, nice job. Oh, you're great. That's, well, thank you. That's really sweet. But what I really want to do is surround myself with people who will ask the right questions, will push me beyond my comfort zone, and very importantly, call me on my own BS.
Yeah.
So I had an executive coach many years ago. I was actually making a choice between several different opportunities that I was considering and kind of in final stages of interviews. I mean, this was, I don't know, I'm trying to think how many years ago this was. This is over a decade ago. And so first she asked me a question of, why do you want to hire me? And I said, first, I knew her. She was a friend, and this is what she did. She coaches, and she's a PhD, and her clients are CEOs and C-suite executives. And I said, because you will call me on my BS. And so we would meet weekly over a course of time where I was evaluating these opportunities, and she would give me homework each week. And my favorite part, in addition to the great advice she gave me, and I still have tidbits and snippets, sorry, in my mind, where she's like 100% commitment to the effort and 100% detachment from the end result, because a lot of that you can't control. But I loved when we were interacting, and she would say something along the lines of, time out, and she would do this on screen, time out, go back to what you just said. Do you really believe what you just said? Is that really? So she would take me back and make me question my own assumptions and beliefs. And it was a great learning experience for me about myself and how I process information, how I made decisions. And ultimately, I learned that I was worried that I was making decisions to not too quickly, but without deeper analysis and evaluation on a personal level. And by nature, I'm analytical from, especially in a professional setting. In my job, I have to be very analytical. And I was worried that I was kind of glossing it over. And instead, what I learned through the process of working with her over several weeks, meeting once a week, was that I actually knew my process enough that I thought I was making a quick decision, but I was quickly funneling through all the analytics around it. And I ended up at the same decision point like 6 or 8 weeks later. And so she's like, okay, I think you can trust your gut, which was really good. But, her calling me on that was what was most valuable to me, because she wasn't just saying, oh, that's nice, because even though I would have gotten to the same result, I wouldn't have trusted the process in the same way.
Well, and getting to use that life skill now in other decisions that you're making, that's actually a perfect segue to overcoming obstacles. You have achieved many tremendous highlights in your career, but each of us has to overcome obstacles and challenges in getting there. What is the process you use when you are faced with an obstacle, a challenge, a little bit different maybe than a decision making, but actually maybe a setback or something related to that? Is it the analytical side of you that you just mentioned? Is it something else? How do you really tackle obstacles?
That's a great question. I love that you just said, is it the analytical side of you? I have found that I am very left-brained and right-brained. And every job that I've had that I enjoyed the most uses both parts. If it was just focused on one and not the other, I wouldn't be as fulfilled, in the process. So when it comes to obstacles, so though not always recognizable, I think in the moment, obstacles have always been for me opportunities to stretch myself beyond where I thought I could reach. What's interesting is the biggest obstacles that I've encountered have been in my own mindset. And I was either creating the obstacle in some cases. In other cases, there was an obstacle, so to speak, but I was making it worse because of the way that I was thinking about it, instead of simply strategizing and executing on how to surmount it. So an example was in my 20s. I chose a role in an aspect of the industry that wasn't really suited for me. It just seemed to be the right thing to do at that point in time. I should go explore this. And I didn't enjoy it, in any way, as much as I've enjoyed all the other roles that I've had, throughout my career. And it was hard to admit that to myself. And that was the obstacle I was creating. It was simply, okay, the job, it wasn't a fit. I needed to not be in that aspect of it, and I need to move back into where I'm best suited. And so when I finally did focus on the lesson was learning that about myself, and then taking the steps to change, the direction. That was when I was able to pivot and move forward. So I think, a lot of it is simply, obstacles are what they are. We're always going to have them. I really want to share this because I recently watched the Jonah Hill documentary, and it's called Stutz on Netflix, if you're familiar, if you've watched it. And it's about him interviewing his personal therapist, who said there are 3 experiences in life that we cannot evade. They are pain, uncertainty, and constant work. So at first, that sounds really grim. And so you first just go, well, that stinks. I don't like the sound of that whatsoever. But I have to say, instantly, I found it liberating, because there will always be obstacles. And when you're going to get up each day and something isn't going to go the way that you expected, then knowing that is just tackle them the way you would any other task. And I remind myself that don't make them bigger than what they really are. A lot of these things just are what they are. And if we simply just address them, learn in the process, if, there's usually always a learning, when, as I said, when it comes to obstacles, then the win is just getting past them and moving forward, just not staying stuck because an obstacle, is presented in front of you. And once you start overcoming them, it becomes easier to do. I mean, it's just a matter of practice, like everything else.
Well, obstacles as opportunities is something we hear from a lot of leaders, learning from things that maybe don't go as we wanted. But I love the idea that obstacles can actually be internal, because I think that a lot of us struggle with that, whether it's negative self-talk or imposter syndrome or other things that we create, or am I qualified for that? Or should I have been invited to speak on that? And those obstacles in our own mind are maybe not thought of quite as frequently as the ones that are external. As leaders, we all take risks. And certainly one that I note that you mentioned earlier was moving around a lot, which I love because it is scary and there are, it could go different ways for you. Do you think about tackling risks in the same way that you tackle obstacles? Do you think about what you'll get out of the risk? Or what's the worst thing that could happen? How do you face risks and decide which ones are worth pushing through?
Yeah, that's a great question. The first, risk is different for everybody, and what makes up a risk and what is based on what people's comfort zone is. Like, I had said, I grew up in Maine and I was perfectly comfortable heading off to Cornell, a 10-hour drive away from home. I think I even said that to my parents, it's 10 hours. You can't show up unannounced. But I was happy to move around just because I was so excited to explore the world beyond, the state where I was raised and a couple of the states where we vacationed, prior to. And I was excited to meet people who were different, than myself and who I'd grown up around. So that was easy for me. It didn't feel like, so much of a risk. So I guess the risks I've been willing to pursue are ongoing learning, practicing new things. I remind myself that you don't have to be good at everything, and it's okay to try something new and learn something because it's interesting or useful, or whatever your reason may be for wanting to explore that. And you don't have to be a master of it. You don't have to go pro. You can still just golf for the sake of golfing if you really want to. And taking on new roles that stretch me. I have always said I don't want to do a job that I've done before. I always want to build on it. I always want to step into opportunities, whatever they are, where I know I'm going to have to acquire some new skills. I'm going to have to use skills I have in a new way. And I'm going to somehow have to expand myself beyond what I've, done to date. So I think that's always important to me, when I look at the risks is, how am I going to grow from this? And so I guess, how I tackle risks are, I start with knowing myself. What is it that I want? What's important to me? What do I want to pursue and what do I want to achieve? And then I evaluate the risk in light of those things. Is it going to help me get to where I want to go? Is it, and you're right. I mean, it's like a pro-con list. It's, what's the worst thing that can happen? The same mentor, the same executive coach I mentioned before, who was so valuable, said, there's really only two things you can't change, decisions you can't change. And I can't remember. And one of them was, she actually said one of them was who you choose as your partner, your life partner, which I guess actually people can change along the way. And she's like, and, then you can't change where you're born, or you can't change, certain things about literally your the makeup and comprised of who you are. She goes, everything else you can change. You make a decision, it doesn't work, you can always change it. So the downside, that downside risk assessment of what's the worst thing that can happen is great to consider. Some people get trapped, I think, in a fatalistic thought of, oh God, this could happen and this could happen. First of all, the likelihood of all the things that come up in your mind happening are really, really slim. But I also like to look at what's the best thing that can happen. What if? Because if I feel like sometimes if you can't dream it, you can't achieve it. So you have to really kind of dream big. What's the best thing that could possibly happen in the situation? And then let me add one more thing to it that occurs to me. It's also, I do try to ask myself, I've learned this over the years, am I considering this because of what I think and want, or because of pressure and expectations from others and what I want to do to make someone else happy? And, there's a place for both. I mean, sometimes you are doing things, because you want it, for other people, and that's perfectly understandable. But does it serve what you want as well? And that's a really critical piece that I always try to remind myself as I'm taking risks. Am I doing it just because, I feel like other people are doing it and I should be doing it too? And is that the lens I'm looking through this, or do I think it's actually the right strategy and approach for me and what I want to achieve in my life and my career?
Well, I also like flipping the narrative from what's the worst thing that could happen to what's the best thing that could happen, because I tend to have a very sunny outlook as well, wanting to see the positivity in things and not dwell on the negativity. Andrea, one of the things that you are known in our industry for is your tremendous advocacy on behalf of others. When I formed the Women in Hospitality Leadership Alliance, I came to you right away because I wanted your guidance in a space that you've been so incredibly passionate and involved in for a long time. You not only advocate for others, but there is a way that you advocate for yourself as well. And that is another area, much like public speaking, that a lot of people get really hung up on is, I don't know the best way to advocate for myself, or I don't deserve to advocate for myself. What would you tell people that are listening about the steps or how to overcome maybe that negative self-talk to really advocate for what they want?
That's a great question. First, everyone deserves to advocate for themselves, period. Whoever's listening to us chat here, I hope that you understand that you deserve to advocate for yourself. And thank you so much. I appreciate what you shared. And a couple of years ago, another dear friend and industry leader like yourself told me that if you looked up the word advocate in the dictionary, she said my photo would be next to it. And the acknowledgement means a lot to me, both because it means my efforts, are working, my efforts are acknowledged, and that they're having a notable impact, because advocating for others, it matters to me to see other people rise. And interestingly, by sharing that with you just now, I just advocated for myself. And so because you said so, because someone else, in a similar role as yourself and similarly dear to me said it, and I repeated that is part of advocating for yourself. Telling a story of, a way that you have made an impact is a way of advocating. So I'd say, when you're advocating for yourself, focus on facts. So it's always about, what your skills are, your commitments, how you're committed to a specific initiative, the results that you have achieved, the impact that you've had, and then shifting that, making the advocacy for yourself and how your basket of skills, that's what I tend to call it, all of the different experiences that you have and the talents and skills that you've accumulated as your basket, how it benefits the other party. So when you're advocating for yourself, you're trying to achieve something. You're trying to influence someone. You are trying to get a job, get a promotion, a raise in salary. And it should always be about the other person and how it would be beneficial to them. You're advocating for what you are doing, is already beneficial or will be beneficial to them. But really, in the end, you're wrapping up that advocacy with how it's going to benefit them, because you're trying to influence them. You want them to make a decision that is going to support your goals, efforts, and focus forward.
That's such tremendous advice. And as I predicted at the beginning, we are running short on time. There's a million things that I still want to ask you. So we're going to need to find a part 2 at some point. But keeping in mind the motto of DEI advisors for empowering personal success, what is something that we have not touched on so far that you think, if I leave you with one final nugget of wisdom, this is what I would want it to be?
Oh, let's see. So I would say, maybe I'll share 2 real quick ones. One is failing forward. If you aren't failing along the way, you aren't stretching yourself enough. So I would say the goal is to fail forward. Just learn the lesson in whatever happened and apply it to ongoing efforts, because that is how you grow. So just take some chances and be okay with failing. Everybody does. And so, it's not a bad thing. It's just part of, the process of life and career. And then keep learning about and developing yourself by taking positive action every single day. Read something, listen, ask questions, observe, work on something you find challenging. I love doing crossword puzzles in my free time. And then also reflecting. So just reflecting on what you've learned, how you're different today than you were, a year ago or 5 years ago, the experiences and impacts that you've had and then just give yourself grace. So do what you can, and realize that you're always your harshest critic. So just keep working hard, keep moving in the right direction, give yourself grace, stand up when you fall down, brush yourself off, and keep going.
Oh, such tremendous advice. I said that was going to be the last question, but I cannot leave today without asking you, what is Andrea Foster's happy place? Where is that big, broad smile going to be shining the brightest?
So it's not a specific place, actually. Wherever I am with the love of my life is my happy place. So it's a state of being more than anything else. And I am a person who loves to do things. I don't sit still very well. And so when I'm actively working on a project or an initiative that holds meaning for me, I am in my happy place. And when I'm not actively working on something, believe me, I'm looking around going, what's the next project I can take on? Can I rearrange something? Can I reorganize something? So there's always something, just engages my mind and allows me to make something better. That's when I'm smiling the widest.
Oh, I love that so much. Well, Andrea, on behalf of myself personally, on behalf of the hospitality industry, thank you so much for your leadership, and thanks for sharing your insights with us today. And thank you for everything in supporting DEI advisors and helping to elevate women and others in the hospitality industry.
Well, it is my honor, and thank you so much for having me here.